Hello, this is the Hermetic Hipster and welcome to my channel. Again, thank you for all the commenters and advice on my videos. Everyone who's been posting has really helped me improve my content and I really appreciate it. Today I'm going to go back to my book reviews and take a look at one of the more strange and controversial books from Mage's past, the book Masters of the Arts from 1st edition. Masters of the Arts is a book about archmages, those powerful and rare awakened who have mastered the spheres of the 6th and above levels. The mastery levels of Arete and spheres above 6 are not usually used in games of Mage, and certainly were not used in 1st edition until this book came out. According to rumour and hearsay, the Arete stat was only ever considered to go above 10 due to a typo in an older book, originally being capped at 5, with mages who go above this attaining the titular ascension of the game. This holds some weight, as archmages are considered by other awakened to be something of a misstep on the road to ascension. Mages are supposed to ascend from Arete 5 to the awakened enlightened state, and leave the Tellurium behind altogether, but archmages sacrifice this true enlightenment for ever more power. This is the running theme throughout the book, power at the cost of humanity. Although not the direct spiritual corruption of a vampire, the more a mage attains power, the more they remove themselves from humanity, and becoming an archmage, or even an exemplar, means such a far removal that you may hardly consider yourself human at all. I will also preface this by saying that this book is a mix in the term of its contents. Some of my friends love it, some hate it, and I think I fall somewhere in the middle, and in what ways I will explain as I go through the book. The first fiction, however, is excellent. It really sets the tone and is one of the most catching fictions in a mage book I've read, giving a really grabbing narrative. I won't spoil it, but I would recommend reading it to allow yourself to see the tone of the coming book in its best possible light. The first part of the book is another fiction, setting it up as an in-world tome giving advice for young mages on how to become an archmagus. Obviously this is a little strange, that you could attempt to formalize how to achieve ascension in a book, but the writers do appear to be hermetic, and if anyone is going to attempt to boil down and quantify enlightenment, it's the Order of Hermes. The rest of the introduction does a good job of exploring exactly an archmagus is, contextualizing using them in games, and explaining the themes present in the book. The most important part is the theme, with greatness, loss, setting up archmages to be tragic figures, who have powers on par with vampiric Methuselahs and Antediluvians at their fingertips, but who live hollow lives, having missed the boat for true ascension, and likely having sacrificed much of a fulfilling life in search of these godlike powers. Chapter 1 is titled Retrospect, and gives an update to many core mage fundamentals in the context of archmagedom. Avatars are explained as being even more important, being the driving force behind a mage's seeking these heights of Arete, and seekings are gone into too. Not too much is given here, although it does present the avatar types, i.e. dynamic, primordial, pattern and questing, as a theme, and this has been used less and less in more recent books, something I'm personally thankful for. It also did shock me slightly by giving the definition of an avatar as being a shard of pure prime. I wasn't really aware of an exact definition of an avatar until I read this, and I think I preferred the mystery personally. How the various orders look at archmagedom is also shown, as well as within the Union and the Crafts, this book coming out before the Disparate Alliance was created. Unfortunately, these parts just talk in general terms about how to advance within the traditions and conventions without really mentioning archmages very much at all. Although it's kind of interesting to look at advancement within the traditions, this is covered in massively more detail in the tradition books, and something here really falls short, and we missed an opportunity to see what an archmage from the traditions and conventions might look like, instead of having this rundown of how to advance within them. There are some interesting parts though. The part saying the Wu Lung have more archmages than the Order of Hermes is cool, but again, most of it's pretty bland. The next part though is very interesting, and focusing on how an archmage keeps their normal lives while questing for godlike powers. Maintaining relationships, a job, and mundane study are all encouraged, and I think this concept is where the archmage becomes more interesting than a simple, powerful will worker, and their theme of cursed by power comes to the fore. How do you maintain relationships as an archmage? How do you respond to normal problems without resorting to the vast magic at your fingertips? And if you do, what are the consequences of that? Mind magic seems like an interesting example of this. If you're able to read thoughts, rewrite memories, and make anybody see things from your point of view, you would have to be incredibly disciplined, not to use these powers in your everyday life or even on your loved ones. Chapter 2 is titled Threshold, and it details in greater depth how a master becomes an archmage. Unfortunately, I have major issues with this section of the book. Firstly, it's very vague about the whole thing. I understand it's a vague concept, but surely this would be the place and the book to give substantial ideas on it. Although my major gripe with this part is of the theme of the section, in that political acknowledgement seems to be the primary step to becoming an archmage. It says that even if you possess the spheres above mastery ranks, you are not an archmage until the other archmages let you in their club. This runs counter to one of the more interesting themes explored earlier, the idea that an archmage has missed the ascension boat and become a tragic if powerful figure to other mages. Even the most hidebound of traditions, the Order of Hermes, bases their rank on demonstrable magical ability, with some exceptions, and to me the idea that the paramount requirement for archmagedom is how popular you are with the other mages seems idiotic. I can see this being a case within an organisation for the purpose of internal ranks, similar in fiction to Anakin not being accepted to the Jedi Council despite being powerful enough, due to his lack of personal balance, but for ubiquitous terms of archmage that has been clearly defined outside of internal tradition protocol, it seems redundant. Although I can see it being a factor in an archmage's journey, to make this the major theme of this chapter is a real pity. Chapter 3 is about how an archmage conducts themselves once they are acknowledged as one, covering the mundanities of life to supernatural companions you may acquire over your many years of arcane existence. It covers many of the clans of vampires and werewolf tribes and auspices, and even some of the changeling breeds, wraiths and fae. Unfortunately, the advice is similar for most of the subjects, usually being, you could be friends, but be careful. Clan Simiski is placed in a pretty positive light, and the children of Gaia are assumed to be violent lunatics. The only group you are totally warned off is Clan Malkavian, and that is not something I will disagree with. Also in this chapter is general advice on how to be an archmage, trials and obstacles you may encounter, and rules to live by. I feel these are fairly important to read if you want to play an archmage, as coming into one as a new player with this new player attitude really doesn't make a lot of sense in my opinion. And some of the advice is really good, but some of it is very obvious. My main complaint with this section is how the first person description gets in the way, with the idea being filtered through the characters in world authors, meaning that an archmage is telling a prospective archmage to watch their bags. Like I said, it feels a little obvious, and similar to what advice a new cop might be given on his first beat, not advice from one godlike being to another. The section on paradox, however, is nice. If paradox is a thorn in a mage's side, then it's a spear in the ribs of the archmage. They are constantly having to find the balance of using their powers, flexing the very reason they have suffered and studied so hard, and the inevitable madness of the backlash that reality gives them for doing so. It details several ways of removing or limiting paradox, the most extreme being removing oneself from the material plane altogether. But personally, I like the idea of an ancient mage, half mad, performing some grand effect upon the space-time continuum, then settling down for a smoke while he waits for his old friend, the paradox spirit Wrinkle, to debate and compromise on what's going to happen to him this time. The last section of this chapter lists several horizon realms an archmage might encounter or abide in during his journey. There are several out-of-date references to the Avatar Storm, but they are interesting for looking at some of the old lore, and the realms are kind of cool. I especially like the Paradox realms, and although they have been expanded by later books, this section floats the idea that the Paradox realms are all linked somehow, a potentially interesting Umbral adventure. The fourth section is very meaty, and deals with the larger concepts of mage, the kind of things you would expect to have in a book about archmages. Things like immortality and godhood are explored, as well as the endgame goals of the various groups in the Ascension War and what they would hope to achieve. This part is the most philosophical of the book's chapters, and actually does a really great job of stepping back and looking at the various points of view of our usual suspects in the traditions, crafts, and technocratic union. Honestly, I found this to be a really wonderful summarization of the various groups, as it feels like it comes from a bird's-eye view, the kind of perspective only an archmage might have. Unfortunately, then we get to the final chapter. This section is tragically bad in parts, but still fascinating to read, and oddly kind of endearing. In this section we have the Arch Spheres, certainly without question the most powerful abilities within the world of darkness. This is the meat of archmagedom, and this is the reason masters sacrifice the understanding of enlightenment for the raw power of the Archmage spheres, and they are hilarious. Most of them don't even read like sphere ranks, but just powerful rotes, Some are stupid powers that could never possibly have any effect on any kind of RPG game. Some are simply dressed up effects from lower sphere ranks, and some are just really, really, really badly made. I will do a deep dive on these effects, as they're definitely worth it, but first this section explains how to cast Archmage spheres. In practice, your effects are almost certainly going to be above difficulty 10 with the higher level effects, so even more successes are needed to make these effects happen. For each point of difficulty above 10, you simply add one success needed to the effect. This is needlessly nitpicky in my opinion, and there are no other guidelines for using this kind of level of magic, so any amount of successes to cause the effect is going to be arbitrary, and often above 10 or 20. To throw in additional number crunching to what are basically plot powers just seems pointless to me. Also in this part, although after the archspheres themselves, is a rule called Cascading Spheres that allows archmages to use spheres they do not possess that are linked to the ones they have above 5. I actually like this idea, although I disagree with the groupings, but in practice it's going to be so hard to use these effects as they are cast with such a high difficulty, that difficulty equal to the archsphere that gave them this ability, that a minor investment from the hundreds of experience you've spent to get here might just be worth putting into the lower level dots. There are also 2 rotes providing you eternal life, Serenity of Stone and Shed the Years, although oddly neither of them actually use archsphere ranks, but I guess it's still within this book's purview. But now for the shining star of this book, the archspheres, and I will look at each one individually. Correspondence is not too bad. The rank 6 ability is greater manipulation of space that is normally allowed within rank 5, but 7 is the ability to ignore wards. This is a major theme among the arch ranks, that they are not a premise or collection of theories to be applied, but often a specific ability, and this one is awful, giving you the ability to ignore wards as long as you get more successes than it was made to cast. This is literally just the mechanics of any mage would use to overcome wards, or indeed any magical effect, and although this would allow you to leave the ward unharmed in theory, it's very specific and disappointing for such a hard-fought and mythical power level. Rank 8 allows a mage to take the reality zone with them when they teleport to different planes of existence, and allows him to go into spirit realms unaided by the sphere of spirit. And this is quite odd, and when the given explanation says that you could still breathe in a vacuum, again oddly specific, and also in effect easily achievable with sphere ranks 3 or below in my opinion. 9 is that you can move anywhere in the Tellurian or spirit realms. At least this power is as stupidly powerful as it should be, but again, feels more like a special ability than sphere rank that you should apply creatively. Entropy is by far one of the worst offenders on this list. Rank 6 isn't too bad, allowing a mage to calcify or disintegrate objects at will, but rank 7 is the control the evolution of a species. It's just an odd place to go with this power. I can see the connection with chance and probability in this, but the effect not only seems unusable in a normal game, but also massively within the purview of life magic, and also not that impressive, giving a mage the abilities of a pug breeder if slightly sped up. For the effect, it also seems far easier just to use lower level spheres to achieve. Life 2 and 3 can alter animals directly, and this effect says that multiple large rituals would still be needed to significantly impact any kind of population. Just a really, really weird one. Rank 8 is all about using entropy to substitute for spirit in the underworld. Again, a failing of imagination to be its own thing, and copying something that's tangentially relevant. Rank 9 allows a mage to alter the target's destiny background dots. Again, just odd, and honestly not that very impactful. Forces is an absolute mess as well. Forces 6 is literally just Forces 1, allowing a mage to see the interplay of forces within an area. And Forces 7 is specifically and only about moving tectonic plates. I cannot conceive of a game that covers the themes of loss and the curse of power within this book that also involves moving around tectonic plates. It's just bizarre. Forces 8 is moving around umbral realms. I honestly just don't know what that means. Even ignoring that this seems like it should fall under the realms of the spirit sphere, I don't know what that means. And Forces 9 is the ability to create new universal forces. Again, I don't know what that means. I can see the idea, but I think it's genuinely hard to expect players to think up new forces of nature. But maybe that's the point. However, the author clearly failed in this, because the given example is Thon, the force that removes the distinction of gender. I'm not sure what the hell this is talking about, but I do think that apparently the ultimate power of House Flambeau, the Masters of Forces, is to catch up to modern gender theory and humanist issues. Life magic is actually quite good, or maybe just compared to forces. Firstly, it looks like each rank gives a sphere effect in general principles, not specific effects, and has a clearly scaling set of power levels. As you go up, you can create more and more complex kind of life, from bizarre aliens to shifter creatures. It also has extended use for life magic, such as it spreading spontaneously, and ideas about merging two forms of life, although I could arguably see this done with much lower levels of magic. Lastly, at rank 9, you can become immortal with it, and I don't mean weak won't die unless killed immortality. This is can't die, full stop. Although again, this level of power should be crazy, I see no real possible use for this in a game of tabletop mage. Matter is similar, but again, gives arch rank effects that are just lower level effects from the same sphere, with rank 6 matter being just rank 2 or 4. Rank 7 is the same, but lets you do things on an apparently grand scale, something usually governed by the number of successes you need. The example given is instead of altering a brick, you can alter a wall. But with how the rules of arch spheres work, it's just much easier to add more successes to a normal effect to increase its area of effect. And in fact, the list of mechanics here don't actually allow for full transmutation, just alteration of the properties of an existing pattern. 8 gives you the ability to make self-replicating patterns, and 9 allows you to create patterns that have different properties to different subjects or in different places. This is actually an effect I quite like. Mind is one of the better ones, with 6 or 7 allowing you to dive deep into the subconscious of past lives and change your avatar. Although this should be prime in my opinion, especially given what's said earlier in the book. It also allows you to tap into human consciousness as a whole. Rank 8, however, is hilarious, as it lets you remove mental flaws you may possess with the abilities of self-awareness. Personally, I wouldn't treat personality flaws as something you can just zap away. It shouldn't really work like that. And also something that you can just do with level 5 mind, or even, frankly, a good therapist. Rank 9 is also a form of immortality and godhood, allowing you to exist in a form of pure consciousness in all people at the same time. Although this is obviously unplayable for a PC, I think this would make a wonderful opponent for a group of less powerful mages. In Prime, both 6 and 7 are about sensing paradox and manipulating it respectively, with one listed effect being giving other people your paradox, basically making all high-ranking choristers into marauders, something the Vibana may have been saying for centuries. Rank 7 does allow you to harness other people's quintessence, which is again something just from lower ranks of Prime. Rank 8 is also just rank 7, being able to give people paradox but with slightly different mechanics. With rank 7 you can worsen paradox backlashes, but with rank 8 you can actually cause them. Rank 9 allows you to remove your own paradox points, which is just Prime 5. Again, lack of imagination and understanding of the base game. However, it also allows you to create universes. I mean, cool. It's kind of just creating a Horizon realm or a pocket universe, but it is a really cool effect. And obviously there are many great things from fiction that you can use as hooks for this power, from the end of Watchmen or Men in Black to that one episode of Rick or Morty. I do wonder why so much of Prime is about messing with paradox, or just giving you abilities that you already had, or abilities that Marauders were despised for. Spirit also isn't too bad, with escalating spirit interaction abilities, with the ability to create spirit realms and blend them together, as well as the power at the highest rank to awaken sleepers' avatars. Although for such a high level power, awakening seems to come at a steep and brutal cost of permanent willpower loss, potential derangements, and death. Both the traditions and the Union actively attempt to awaken sleepers through training and exposure to magic, so it's usually not left entirely to chance anyway, and this power seems kinda brutal, more of a push out of bed than an awakening. Lastly, time is by far the best of the archspheres in my opinion, greatly benefiting from the prevalence of time travel in our literature and pop culture. It's also nicely codified, not confusing, and actually useful in my opinion. Rank 6 is sending things back in time. Rank 7 bypatches much of the negatives of mastery rank time travel, making you Doctor Who or Blackadder in Blackadder Goes Back and Forth. Rank 8 is just a different way of time travelling via portals and doors that goes into great details of explaining why it's different from the other ones and totally fails. And rank 9 is the restaurant at the end of the universe, letting you see all of time, or at least one eon. High-ranking time magic seems to be a facilitator for cool adventures and seems to work consistently with the rest of the spheres at least. The archspheres are mostly pretty bad and pretty dumb, just incoherent mechanically, often uninspired and inconsistent. However, I'm really not surprised. The 5 normal ranks cover almost everything you could want to do, and archspheres were never going to live up to the hype that they deserve. For this reason, I've come up with an alternative system for the mechanics of being an archmage that I hope are a bit more useful in games. Simply, if a mage has dots in a sphere over 5, they basically have plot powers. If an effect fits the theme, and they can attempt it at their discretion, although I personally would not recommend PC archmages. The other rule would be to not look at them using world-shattering high ranks of spheres, but them being able to use low-ranking spheres much more easily. Something like, for each dot in a sphere above 5 they possess, they have an automatic success on any effect they cast from that sphere. Sphere magic is powerful and amazing, but its drawbacks are often its impracticality, and this negates a lot of that for archmages, allowing them to wield sphere magic with convenience and ease, often a more impressive feat than the strange and impossible uses of the archspheres. The rest of the book details some background for archmages, including a new one called Spirit Mentor, that's really not that new, seeing that we now live in the M20 era, and it goes into great depth on certain other ones like familiars, and gives a list of merits or flaws that are a mixed bag. One of them, however, is something I missed out earlier in the book, the ability to become an exemplar. Exemplars are archmages taken to their logical conclusion, mages so in need of power they totally give themselves to a specific sphere, embodying it and losing a lot of what little humanity they had left. This even more than an archmage, and not playable as PCs, but will be awesome NPCs, as they are perfect manifestations of the hubris of power, something to be both admired for their strength and feared for what it cost them. The last thing in the book are the example characters, who really just don't fit with the rest of the stuff in here. None of them have spheres above 6, and most have very few dots in anything aside from their chosen archsphere. While part of me likes this idea as a dedicated specialist, the background on them also doesn't really seem to make a lot of sense, with them being way more normal than you might expect. One of them seems to be going for a Fisher King vibe, something I think is a great idea, but its background misses the mark, saying she only studied magic for a decade, and giving off more of a feeling than a bored hobbyist rather than a master at the pinnacle of their power. For archmages I would use in games though, I tried thinking of them in terms of other fictions as I often do. Figures like Gandalf, Conan, Rick Sanchez and Doctor Who could all be archmages, without becoming the stupid and unplayable like I think is often tempting. And for NPCs, having beers with entirely different mindsets and objectives seems like an interesting idea for a mysterious mentor or an evil villain, or even both concepts combined within the same character. Masters of the Arts is honestly a pretty bad book, although it is very, very fun. And that's one of my favourite kind of books to read and review. There are many good parts, exploring awesome concepts that not only apply to archmages, but to all mage characters as they grow in power, but the important core of the book, the archspheres, are just totally unworkable for the most part, and it's my opinion that they're much better just to replace with plot powers. Any game you did play with archmages as PCs, I firmly believe should be a lot less about mechanics and all about the story, philosophy and strong themes presented within this book, that the book does do well. I recommend reading Masters of the Arts simply on that basis. You certainly won't find it boring. Thank you for watching my review of one of the wacky books of Mage the Ascension. I hope it gave people a look at how to use archmages in their games if they feel that that is what they desire. I'd also like to say that soon, and by that I mean within the month, I will be hosting some content on the onyxpathpublishing Twitches page. So if you would like to see that, I will post a reminder here and on my Instagram as well that you can find in the video description. If it goes well, I might look at hosting some more stuff on Twitch, as the idea of getting audience interaction is at once exciting and terrifying. But I do think it will be a great way to look at the things I miss in my video and answer all your questions. This has been the Hermetic Hipster, and thank you very much for watching.